Jones, and I'm here to tell you folks, the world has fallen. The fascist globalist overlords, they're implementing the Great Reset. You don't believe me? I've seen the tapes. Watch it, folks. Watch as these pot-bellied Zoomer goblins work with the Illuminati to pit us against each other. I promise I'd be a good boy.
Ugh, I'm a good boy.
There's only one cure, folks, and that's liberty. And there's no better channel to find freedom than Fabian Liberty. Anarchy is order. Government is civil war.
You're offensive. Police lives matter?
We're just trying to do school.
What?
You guys have the same sticker as the other.
But this is our space. You're making the space uncomfortable. But you're white.
You're fucking a white male!
What is one way you combat racism? I don't root for white people on the sidewalk.
They want your wallets, they want your guns, they want the wieners off your sons. Democrats.
Oh, no. Oh, we should film it.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman! Vaccine!
Children, they're spreading COVID throughout the population at higher numbers. And people are not entitled to turn themselves into deadly biological weapons by spraying disease-laden aerosols wherever they choose, randomly killing innocent people. This is not freedom, this is homicide, and willful ignorance is no excuse.
What the fuck?
Highest margin of victory yet. It's really impressive. Though, I'm starting to think he might have had help from the Russians.
Look at me, I'm a gay frog. I'm so cool, I'm so neat. I'll never have children and I'm sterilized. But the media says I'm totally cool. I'm a gay frog, I'm a gay fish. It's so good, and I think my daddy actually is.
All right. Super stoked about tonight. Welcome back, boys. I hope you had a fun Tuesday. I did. Had a fun Tuesday picking up my son, hanging out with him. You know, driving back on 95 back into Richmond only to be met with people that were panicking about ice on the roads, randomly doing 25, 35, 40 miles an hour and strange things. Got my family watching, wife and son. How old is your son, Drail? Because sometimes I'm a little inappropriate. I just want to make sure that that's not a, you know what I mean? Like, just throwing that out there. Yo, Rudy, thank you guys so much. Rudy is now a mod. I would like to point out, okay, that being a moderator is not something you can purchase just because Rudy is gives a lot of money to the channel, okay? The way that you're not getting mods, Slobozope. You're banned from the Discord because you do Fed shit, and I can't trust you. But the way that I pick mods, and this is true of Discord as well as YouTube. There's only one person that is a moderator on both. That's Roland. But to be fair, Roland was made a moderator on YouTube only because we were streaming on Twitch. So normally I don't mod people for both the Discord and the YouTube. Just because it's like too much responsibility for one person, as well as like you're not paid. So like I just feel guilty using that much of your time. Like I'd rather you either enjoy the show or hang out in Discord and not have to worry about policing both. But if you want to be a mod, DM me. And my criteria are pretty simple. That is that you're in Discord, that I kind of know you, that you're in streams regularly, and that you're not a Karen, and that you're not you're not a lefty, but also that you're not like a rightoid that's like super concerned with curse words or internet things. I need people that know kind of what's going on with internet lingo and aren't like so far about. I know a Karen that banned me. Yeah, I mean, you can be mad all you want, Slope, but like you were doing Fed shit in the Discord. Also, you have been here really regularly. So like if you want to come back to the Discord and you can like let me write it down. I'll let you back in the Discord. But if you do that shit again, like I'm gonna if you do shit that like attacks me on the server and could get me in trouble and like refuse to back down, like I will ban you. I don't ban that many people. Don't come at me being like you're anti-Semitic when you're the Juiceberg. But yeah, no, I'm definitely talking to Taftaj. I'm talking to Taftaj about civil rights. She's doing some stuff for Reason, and she wants more libertarian thoughts on the concept of the Civil Rights Act. And in terms of that, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Slope is Dope. I'm not your, I have issues with degeneracy in public, but I like Taftaj. You can call me out on that all you want. Nobody has gone harder than me in terms of debates and discussions about the issues of, gender theory, queer theory, putting it in the school system, social emotional learning. I've broke whistleblowers on what's going on in places like Michigan and private Catholic schools. I'm very against these things. But am I against a trans person existing? No, not when they're an adult. If they want to do shit to their body, I don't care. Did I react to Stacy's vid? Stacy Pastry posted a vid. I don't know that I did. I know that I reacted to, I answered her question. Yeah, and also like Taftaj is pretty good. If you want to know more about my stance and my views, like you can go back, you can watch me talk to Benjamin Boyce. I did an entire interview on him about narcissistic personality disorder and covert vulnerable narcissism and how that is like inexorably tied to gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria. You can watch Taftaj and me and Blair White and Buck Angel and Richie. I did interviews with Richie, obviously. You can watch those, but you can also watch Rich. Like I did one of his first interviews. Genuflect was there, Shapeshifter was there, and Chloe Cole was there. I did an interview with Chloe Cole. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm still the only person on the internet where Chloe Cole decided to open up and talk about, the fact that she was sexually assaulted and that she felt shameful about her body and that most of this gender dysphoria shit started with that. And like she doesn't bring it up again because I don't think she necessarily wants to talk about it, and I get that. But like, I'm pretty sure there were audio issues that she had on her end. So she was very quiet. But I'm pretty sure I still have like content wise, the best Chloe Cole interview that's ever existed. Cause I got her to open up because, we used to be pretty cool and pretty tight. So if you want to come at me for like my credentials and going after, gender and queer theory and supporting D-trans people and fighting against this shit in school, your favorite streamer is behind, brother. At best, the only thing he has is more clout, sure. But in terms of like what I've actually done and what I actually talk about and what I actually fight against, you can fuck all the way off. Should all be on my YouTube channel. The Chloe Cole one's also on Rumble. It's one of those few that I have on Rumble where I'm like, ooh, this might get taken down off YouTube. But like here's the interview with Chloe Cole. And then here's the panel that I did with Blair White and Taftaj and Buck Angel and Chloe Cole and Shapeshifter and Richie and Sinead from Genuflect. Is that everyone? I forgot if that's everyone. Sorry if I missed someone. I'm pretty sure Taff is informatic. Taftaj is like, her politics are hard to nail down. I would say she's like, she has some like French kind of philosophical ideas, but for the most part, she's like a Mencius Moldbug type. Yeah, Slope is dope. I don't mind. I don't have anything against fucking utilizing someone's preferred pronouns if I respect them. Like it's honestly, it's fucking weird when you see people that like present as super feminine and you're like, him, you have to call him him. It's just like, dude, if you fucking look like a chick and you act like a chick and you dress like a chick and you seem like a chick, I'm gonna call you her. And if you're a fucking dude in a dress, I'm probably just gonna call you he. I don't care. I don't actually care what someone's preferred pronouns are. Words have meaning. Yeah. If you want my definition and some really good fun blood sports, Slope is dope. It's not a dude in a dress. It's just like ignorant shit. Where is it? Polly. This is where I proved that I went in just with one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to prove that the lefty streamer poly people trans person was indeed a transphobe themselves. But yeah, no. My definition of a gender is pretty simple. It's a socially constructed role that is inherent to the adult biological male and or adult biological female, right? So like adult biological female, if you're talking about woman. Like I think people play gender. I think we all play gender. I think it is obviously socially constructed to a degree, and it's not one-to-one with sex. Like the TERFs are just dumb in that regard. You can also watch my interview with Phil Illy, which is one of the individuals that pushes autogynephilia and wrote a great book on AGP and understanding the sexual nature and the self-satisfaction, of transgenderism, if you will. Like this is not a topic I'm somehow like some fucking lefty permissive on, and it's not a fucking topic that anybody you can bring up to me that wants to debate me on it can debate me on it. But I'll be right back. I had my Keurig put out some coffee, and I just got to go stir the coffee and bring it in. It's kind of crazy though that like I was like, hey, I'm going to be interviewing this person for their work, in regarding to Reason and the Civil Rights Act, and let's talk about the Civil Rights Act. And like everyone in chat is like trans. It's kind of funny how broken some of y'all's brains are on this issue. I was curious to ask, wasn't there two civil rights acts in the U.S. in the 1800s before the 1964 one? I was thinking about it as I looked it up in the past. Yeah, I mean, so there are civil rights legislation. I mean, you could call women's suffrage civil rights, right? But when we say the Civil Rights Act, we're talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's a dude on estrogen and progesterone, presumably, and facial feminization surgery and and breast implants and acting like a chick and looks like one. I know what to tell you there, brother. Also, Taftaj is like not the one to come at with that regard, just because like Taftaj has said multiple times that she regrets her transition. Like, she's not going to detrans because she can't at this point. See, a real woman don't need to do all that. I mean, plenty of real women take estrogen and progesterone. Like, what are you talking about? Plenty of real women get a facial surgery. As a matter of fact, you Jewsbergs love pointing out every time a Jewish woman gets a nose job, right? So obviously there are plenty of women that get surgeries to make their face more attractive. Again, I am far right, but even I can admit Taftaj is very pretty. I mean, it's like her secondary sexual characteristics are very obvious and traditionally attractive. Like, that's just how that works. I mean, it's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, that doesn't mean like you want to suck penis or something. Don't most women in the U.S. take at least some kind of medication for mental problems? This is also true. Not to the high as high as transgender people, though. Oh my God, light candle. There we go. I gotta light a candle. Because it smells like bullshit in here. I could smell it coming from Slope is Dope or somebody similar. But again, we're talking about the Civil Rights Act. We're not talking about fucking... I mean, like, I'm sure her unique perspective as a trans person, like, plays some role. Look up Taft's OnlyFans. I don't know, man. Like, you seem to be the one kind of obsessed, and now you're telling people to look up her OnlyFans. You know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to talk about the civil rights, but you're like, trans, look at the trans porn. I think I might know why you're so obsessed there, buddy. Most women older than about 40 need hormone therapy. Yeah, I mean, you're going to go through, I mean, when you go through menopause, like you're going to get some type of hormone therapy. I mean, unless you don't want to, but I mean, like, it's going to help to a large degree. I mean, it's similar with men taking testosterone, right? But like male low T it's going to come with a different set of things. You had to subscribe just to be sure, right? Does she still do OnlyFans? I know she doesn't like put it out there as much, and I know like she deleted like some of the Twitter accounts or something she had about it, and so now there's just like a fuck ton of like fake Taftaj accounts. Nick debated on feminism on a panel. Okay. What are you specifically referencing, Crod, in those civil rights acts? Like what is it that you're trying to highlight? Like, I mean, like, yeah, there is a history of civil rights acts, during Reconstruction. Like certain things that got rid of like poll tests and literary tests and things of that nature were kind of like created, to kind of combat those legislations, right? But those are like way less specific and sweeping as 1964. My wife is wondering why a woman would need therapy after menopause. So like after menopause, I mean, obviously you can, there's plenty of things you can like, okay. Menopause runs roughshod on a lot of women's hormonal systems, right? And there is some evidence to suggest that, again, I'm not a doctor in this degree, right? But that some of these things can be exacerbated by by the progesterone you're kind of already taking from many birth control pills. And so, that hormone imbalance can lead to thyroid problems. It can lead to, weight gain. It can lead to swelling. It can lead to sleep disorders. It can lead to a lot of like medical issues if your hormones are a little out of balance, both during but especially after postmenopausal, right? And a lot of those things, if you go to an endocrinologist, they can help balance what should be a better target for a healthy hormone balance. Obviously, certain dietary things are going to affect your hormone, whether or not you work out, right? And so if you're eating unhealthy, you were on birth control your whole life, you ate a lot of processed food and bullshit, you're kind of overweight, and then you go through menopause, right? Like, I'm not going to say you're guaranteed, but you're likely going to have hormonal issues. And even if you do all of the right things, they can still occur. And so there's nothing, if you have good insurance, right? And you seem to be having trouble sleeping, you're having trouble, with certain emotional regulations, and you're like seeing a therapist trying to figure it out. Change in diet and going to an endocrinologist and getting like, a profile of what your hormone levels are, multiple times through different times a day, pre and post eating, can have a really good impact on your overall health and well-being. Okay, forget all this. I feel like if you come in and you interrupt what we're talking about, and you want me to answer your question, you should pay the super chat. But I'll let it slide. All right. Hey, forget about all this noise. What do you think of Destiny's attempt to create a media empire, hosting multiple podcasts that are essentially all the same show? Will you ever be on, or will it accomplish anything? It's fine. I'm just teasing you. I don't think I'm blacklisted by Destiny per se, but Destiny doesn't like me, right? Like, we've been on a few panel shows before, and pretty much every time we've debated on a panel, he's never done a 1v1 with me, but pretty much any time we've been on a panel, I eventually end up talking about philosophy at some point. He gets really, really frustrated and angry, calls me a debate bro, says that I'm being like, that I'm not actually talking about the issue, then accuses me of logical fallacies. Then I respond by explaining why those logical fallacies are not logical, like how I didn't do that. And then explain the logical fallacies that he's using. Then he says, you're just a debate bro for bringing up logical fallacies that he brought up. And then he usually walks away and like goes and makes some food or gets a drink or something. Dude, I appreciate it, Audacity. I'm just teasing. Nobody has to pay me. But if you pay me, even if we're in the middle of a channel, even if I'm in the middle of a debate or anything, I will answer your question. I've not missed a single super chat yet, with the exception of Stacy Pastries, which I waited until the next stream and really thought about and really wanted to give the best answer I could. Because it was a difficult question. It was a worthy one. I don't know that I could answer it perfectly, but I did my best. But yeah, so I don't think I'm blacklisted per se. Now, I was on two or three Kicker Keeps when Kronos was hosting them on Kick, and Destiny was like the co-host. And like Kronos and Destiny had a fallout over like Israel-Palestine shit. And Kronos liked me, and so Kronos would invite me to his Kicker Keep. And Kronos even told me, like, like at one point when we did like a vote, I was like one of the few non-lawyers on a discussion. Was it about January 6th? It had something similar to do with January 6th. And I was one of the few non-lawyers on there. And like everybody was against me at some point. And even Kronos was like, dude, you should have won. Like, you bodied everybody despite being like 6v1. And like, I could tell Destiny really didn't like that. So like, I don't think I'll ever be on a Destiny podcast unless I gain like a lot more clout. But I also don't think that like, I don't think he has like made it, a thing to blacklist me. I just don't think I have that much clout, and he doesn't particularly like me. As far as him making a bunch of shows and shit, I don't care. They don't like, he has a lot of money. He can make a lot of shows. I don't find his content to be good. I mean, I understand he has clout, and I understand that like what he does shapes the space, and that like, you know, but like, and I also don't care that like he's a degenerate, or that like, you know, he, you know, finds some random girl and like gives her a career in hopes of fucking her, and then may or may not fuck her. I don't care that he, you know, was a cuck or whatever, or all these other things. Like, I just think he's a swarmy like little fuck that like, you know, preps for debates based off of what he believes will be, you know, the most entertaining, and what he believes will be like controversial, like to try and kind of fucking, you know, just to fucking like to maintain the game. Like, he plays the game and he plays it well, and in many ways he invented the game in terms of like Twitch panel politics. But like, I guess I'm just not as bothered by him as other people are, because every time he says something, it's just dumb. The only thing I can really say about Destiny is that like, it's very clear the dude is like an Adderall or cocaine addiction, that he's taking way too much to maintain everything that he's doing. And it seems like everyone around him is more worried about leeching off of him for clout, and like using him to fuel their own career, than they are like he doesn't have any friends around him. Because like, friends would be like, dude, I know that's not a speech impediment. Your jaw has gotten worse. Like, you have a problem. Like, you got to stop, man, or you got to get some help, or you got to like, at the very least, like, do dry January or like sober October, right? Like, and cut off this shit for a while. Take a little vacation, get some perspective, because like, this shit's not going to be good for you in the long term. Because nobody around him gives a fuck about him. Not so erudite, like, you know, I don't know, maybe she did talk to him about it or something, but like, all these people that have like all these little shows with him and, you know, do these debates with him and shit, none of them care. Like, he's just a meal ticket. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some behind the scenes shit I'm not seeing, right? And so like, that's why I'm like somewhat recalcitrant to like throw anybody under the bus, but like, it doesn't look like they're fighting for him. It looks like they're just using him for a meal ticket, and they don't care if he ends up destroying himself in 10 years. So that's how I feel. And I think that's part of the reason he's gone so fucking unhinged, is that like, his wife left him. He got exposed by a bunch of people. He fucking, you know, he's clearly fucking high all the time, and he's just thrown himself into his work. He doesn't have a good example of his children, like, you know, or his son, sorry. Like, and like, I don't know, like, if I went through all that shit, I'd probably be crazy and say unhinged shit too. And I would hope that someone would step in and be like, dude, you need to take a break. You need to go get some perspective. You have plenty of money. Like, go stop doing all this shit. Go on a beach somewhere and disappear for 2 weeks. I appreciated Audacity. And the sex tape leaked did him no favors. Like, but like, the sex tape didn't even do anything for him. Like, that's what's really crazy. Is that like, I'm just moving this over here to like clip some of my desk that's getting clipped. Like, the sex tape didn't do him any favors, but it also like, it like, anybody that was like a hardcore DGG or didn't care. You know what I mean? Like, he's done so many fucking controversial things that at this point he's kind of immune to being canceled, because the people that are with him, and the people that are against him hate him. And like, it's very easy to just be like, oh, he hates me because I'm so good at debating and my politics are based. He's clearly unbalanced. Even hearkening back to his StarCraft 2 days, he only wants to win to get at least place on the top 3. His personality has not changed much. I mean, like, we all want to win, right? And we all suffer from audience capture. Like, you know, I took like a month or 2 off to move into this new apartment and to make a little bit of money, to get caught up on some things, and to transition to the fact that I was picking my son up twice a week instead of once a week. So like, twice a week I have to spend like 4 to 6 hours kind of like, you know, getting ready, getting my son, you know, picking him up, getting him some food, hanging out with him for a while, dropping him off, etc. from his autism school. And so like, all of that shit is like, you know, I took like a month or 2 off, and like, it was really good for me. Like, I realized a lot that I was like leaning into like the right wing debate space trying to like make my predominantly, paleo conservative audience, because like most of you guys aren't anarcho-capitalists. Like there's not enough anarcho-capitalists to fill a fucking live stream, right? Most of you guys are paleo conservatives, liberty-minded, limited government, like obviously there's going to be some libertarians and some ANCAPs there. There's going to be some fucking far right, whatever the fuck that means, people, right? There's going to be a mixture of people, but most of our audience is right wing. And I found myself like not being true to myself in debates, and like particularly constantly going after the left is like the bigger threat. And then like stepping away and like seeing how politics is shifting and seeing Twitter, it's like, yeah, we kind of have some warning bells on the right that we need to be paying attention to. And I was ignoring them. And I think part of that was like a subconscious thing, because like anytime I would go after the right hardcore, I'd lose audience. And like kind of have to have that balance, right? Like you have to have that balance of entertaining your core audience and at the same time, being truthful. And it gets really easy to lose perspective if you don't take like some time off. I'm an ANCAP, Rudy. I appreciate you. There are other ANCAPs here for sure. But yeah, I'm here to talk about the Civil Rights Act with Taftaj. She's working on some project. I want to know more about it. I'm super excited to see what she's doing about it. Obviously, she's not a libertarian. She's kind of, like I said, she's more of a, oh my God, shut the fuck up about the she shit. I'm going to call her she. Like, it is what it is. You're going to have to get over it. Fake ANCAP. What's up, Grid One Motorsports? An unreasonable man on YouTube. You should definitely check him out. He definitely brings he's bringing the Gen X vibe back to this. You're one of the few Gen X people I like, Grid One, because like most of Gen X that I've seen that have like recently come into like the political realm are really, really, really confident and really, really, really unaware of what's going on. And it has been really fucking frustrating because, like, this is obviously not everyone, but, like, for a large part of Gen X, right? You guys, and this isn't anything against you, Grid One, right? I'm speaking in generalizations here, but many Gen X people, they fucked off. They drank like crazy. They disobeyed their parents. They were the first soft generation, and they claimed to be like, oh, we were a generation of the hard knocks. It's like, no, dude. The boomers were the first helicopter parents that didn't instill order in their family and like let you guys fucking go off and be metalheads and do crazy shit, right? The greatest generation has some role to play in that in terms of the baby boomers and like hippies, right? But boomers should have seen it, like they lived it. They should have seen that as a problem, and they didn't. And they only gave a fuck about themselves and like let Gen X do whatever the fuck they want while at this and millennials, we had the helicopter parents, but you guys were just kind of they just let you do whatever. They didn't give a fuck about you. And then you guys like went off, did drugs, went and did crazy shit, and you kind of like reaped all the benefits that the boomers had. Many of the same benefits that the boomers had, Gen X had. You guys had, available jobs. You guys, were working during the .com boom. You guys had low rent and low housing and fucking 401ks and all this shit. And then my generation, millennials, like I turned 18 during Occupy Wall Street, right? Like I was 18. Well, actually I turned 18 like a little before Occupy, but like when I was 18 and I graduated high school, that was when the fucking, when the financial collapse happened. Like we have been either from a leftist perspective or from a right-wing perspective, millennials have been involved in politics this whole time, right? It's been nearly 20 years that we've been involved in politics. And then all of a sudden Gen X like decides to come out of their fucking drunken stupor, hop onto the scene and be like, the adults are back and we're going to tell you what we need. When I was a kid, we fucking drank from the water hose and fucking we knew to come back home when the lights on the street lights went out, and you pampered online kiddos know nothing. They don't know anything about political philosophy. They're like politically unaware more than any other generation. The boomers know more about politics. Millennials know more about politics. Hell, the fucking Gen Z know more about politics, even though they're leftists, than most Gen Xers do. And Gen Xers come in like, now respect us and listen to us, kids. The adults are back. And like, as a millennial, I'm like, dude, no. We've been fighting since Occupy Wall Street. We've been fighting since 2009, okay? It's 2024. We've seen all this shit happen over the past 15 fucking years, and then all of a sudden you came out of the woodwork and like want to tell us how it is. It's like, no, shut up, sit down, listen, read, figure out what's going on, and like work with us. But like, so many Gen X want to like hold the flag because of their age, and it's like, no, guys, you're the guys who fucked all this up. Okay, this doesn't look as good as I thought because he keeps cutting off my hand, so I'm going back to this. I did actually drink from the water hose, and I did walk to school by myself when I was 10, but I also have paid attention to the world around me since I was like 15. You're an exception to the rule, but like, there's a lot of Gen X content creators that like fell asleep at the wheel for the past 15 years and like, or the past 20 years, and there's like no humility from them, and there's no recognition that like they need to learn and that they need to like figure out what's going on. They're just like, oh, they're talking about trans shit in schools. And it's like, yeah, dude, this is what queer theory is. This is who David Halperin is. This is who Ruben Gale is. Okay, here's the history of critical theory. Here's why that shit is there. Here's critical pedagogy. Here's Paulo Freire. Here's what's going on. They're like, oh, you're just talking about a bunch of academic shit just like those dumb leftists. We just need to have, you know, another Florida governor come in and fucking, you know, ban this shit. And it's like, yeah, your bans don't work, dude. These people are hip to your game. You're 60 years behind on the philosophy of fighting the fucking left. The Gen Z I know is nihilist. Gen Z is nihilist, I think. And the nihilism, I think, is in a lot of the young men has turned them conservative, as Slope is Dope is talking about. Like, there's a lot more conservatism in Gen Z. Like, Gen Z's conservatism is weird, though. In that it's like they're more progressive on some issues, but also that is also probably rapidly going to change soon because they're so much more malleable. And like Gen Z young men are growing up in a world where like they hate, where like their school system, their media, their jobs, everyone discriminate against them, hate them because they're white men. Like they're growing up in a world. Like one of the, I think the things that the left doesn't realize that they've been doing is they've been ratcheting up the propaganda in our education system, in our media and everything. And like that slow boil works for a while. But the problem is that like, it's not really working on Gen Z as well. And the reason it's not working on Gen Z as well is because they weren't there for the slow boil. Like Gen Z kids that are in high school are like, why the fuck is slavery part of my math questions? Right? Like they didn't have the slow boil. Like they just have the full-blown leftist propaganda, and it's like kind of too obvious, and it's too upfront, and it's too much of like hating them, and like all of these combinations together. Like Gen Z is just like, a lot of Gen Z are like not falling for the propaganda because it's like it's too obvious, it's too laid out. Bro, it's none of that. You're so wrong. It's because no pussy. I mean, the thing is that Gen Z girls aren't getting dick either. Like, Gen Z girls are having less sex than millennials and Gen X were. But you're not wrong, right? Like, being, you know, the social media landscape and, like, you know, dating apps and things like that, and the kind of, like, the sexual promiscuity of girls that are sexually active, right? And like going on dating apps and everything, and you know, the kind of like the extreme swing back to hypergamy, right? Where like, you know, every guy needs to be 666, 6 figures, 6 pack, 6 inches, 6 feet tall, you know, that kind of thing, has left a lot of young men like completely isolated and incapable of being a part of a dating market that, you know. And then of course there is obviously hoflation, right? A lot of these girls ain't worth shit. But I mean, also a lot of that is a self-fulfilling prophecy of social media and the red pill movement. Like there are more girl virgins in Gen Z than there are in Gen X and millennials. There are more okay, pause. Obviously that's true because millennials and Gen X have had more time to have sex and more time to be in relationships. But at the same time in their age category. Nice. 2 out of the 3 6s. Let's go. Well, I'll tell you this. Mark being my roommate does not make 6 figures. $666, it's time to bring back the Satanic Panic. No, I think the Satanic Panic is absolutely I mean, I get that you're just making a joke about the 666s, but like the Satanic Panic is probably one of the worst things in American history that essentially became a win for the left. I paid 6 figures in income taxes. That's the best I can do. Well, okay. Well, then, like, what's the highest tax bracket right now? Like 31%. So if you paid 6 figures in income taxes, you definitely made 6 figures. I thought 40%. I thought 31 was the highest tax bracket currently for income. Okay, currently it's 37%. Okay. Oh no, it was 31% under Trump. That's what it was. That's why that number's sticking out. It's currently 37%. Because the Biden administration let some of the Trump tax cuts go through. New York State income tax as well. Why the fuck New York State? I thought you were in Tennessee. Why the fuck were you paying like did you leave? Oh, but like your businesses are set up in New York for certain reasons or something? Yeah, that makes sense. Why don't you just like set it in New Jersey? I mean, isn't that why so many people have like New Jersey businesses? Like, couldn't you just like set up a primary, workplace that you spend like a certain percentage of time? We have an apartment in New Jersey for that very reason. Okay, fair enough. Delaware? Yeah. Well, I mean, like, New Jersey is just such a quick way to get to New York City. Texas! Yeah, dude, if I didn't have kids, like, I probably would move to, like, Florida or Texas or something. Like, I definitely wouldn't, I got your DM, Peacecraft. That's funny. New York City has a city income. Dude, New York City, dude, like, I never lived in New York City, right? I never would. I mean, obviously, I've been quite a few times. I'm on the East Coast. But, like, just not even New York City, just being stationed at Fort Drum and, like, having to abide by, like, New York State laws, I was just like, dude, what the fuck is this shit? Like, the fucking, like, the mandated recycling so that your recycling could end up in the same trash heaps as the trash anyways. Like, shit like that, I was just like, dude, fuck this state. Like, it was just, like, little shit like that was just like, dude, why is this a thing? Hey, what's up, Ghost Recon? Yeah, no, like, I would definitely, I mean, like, New Hampshire is the most libertarian state. It's like, I don't know how good Mark is ripped. Yeah, Mark's got a very low body fat and he's got some muscle. Mark's got one of those like yogi bodies. But yeah, it's just like I kind of like the concept of New Hampshire, and I understand why the Free State Project was done there. But like, it's just so like as the society and the U.S. kind of crumbles, I really fear like what New Hampshire has to deal with all of that blue kind of like wall of shit surrounding them. You know what I mean? Like, as much as I do think the New Hampshire project, the Free State Project in New Hampshire is really good, and I support it, and like I don't think like, and I think New Hampshire is a great place to move to. For me personally, if I had to choose, I'd probably go somewhere like Texas, because like even though I'd have to deal with right-wing authoritarian bullshit in Texas, if like America starts collapsing, I could see Texas being like, all right, cool, go fuck yourself. We're our own country. Whereas like New Hampshire can't fucking do that. It's surrounded by nothing but blue, and unless they take like Massachusetts or something, they're essentially landlocked. Like there's one tiny sliver, if I remember correctly, of like New Hampshire being on the coast. Let me look real quick. Yeah, like there's Portsmouth, right? So they're not landlocked, but like overwhelmingly their border is land surrounded by just so much blue commie bullshit that like it's good to go to a state that believes in your values, but like part of me feels like the Free State Project is like a little bit of an exercise in futility, just because of like if the nation state falls, I don't think New Hampshire is going to make it. Which succeeds first, Texas or New Hampshire? Like, I could see New Hampshire seceding first, kinda. I just don't see them being able to defend themselves. Like they have, like they don't have like they just like Texas could very quickly control the Gulf of Mexico, right? And utilize that as a port, and have trade from both the west and east coast. Let me see. Right. And also be able to, yeah, I mean, like they're put in a position where like, I don't think Mexico's a big threat. Right. And the surrounding states are likely to lean philosophically and politically close to what Texas leans anyways. And then Texas, if they became their own nation state, right, like they could trade with Cuba and the Bahamas and like Mexico and like Belize and like, you know, the shipping routes, you know, through the Gulf of Mexico, which they could keep pretty easily, like wouldn't be that big of a deal to go through the Panama Canal, right? Like they're just not as, it's just not as problematic as a position, considering your neighbors and the land and the resources compared to New Hampshire. Texas leaves. Could others leave as well as with Texas? I mean, I'm all for national divorce, but like predicting what happens once if Texas secedes is just like, there's too many fucking variables to really know. It's just, it looks like there are more advantages to Texas than others. Texas could easily control the Gulf of Mexico. This is an election I didn't know I could get. I mean, maybe. Where the fuck is the debate? There's no debate. I'm going to have a conversation with Taftaj. And I almost always come into stream about an hour before. So tomorrow, I'm probably not going to come on stream until like right before the panel. Because I'm doing a WIC panel at 6. But of course, it's Thursday, so I have my son. Yo, I didn't expect my roommate to chip in. All right, hold on. The link is just, are you sure you want to leave YouTube? Okay, the link you sent was, let me put in a different link, because I think you sent a link via YouTube. There we go. Ground fridge? Isn't this just a cellar? I mean, like, is this like a cheaper cellar, basically? How much do they cost? 210 centimeters tall. So what's that like? I'm like close to I'm like 198, 199 centimeters. So I had 6'5". So was that like 6'7", 6'8"? Well, yeah, like 6'8". Gulf of America, let's go. Ghost Recon. Yeah, I mean, dude, this shit with Trump, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Like, I hope Trump isn't actually serious about using military action to fucking control the Panama Canal and Greenland. I hope this is like some type of meme or something. I don't know, man. It's a little fucking frightening. I'm not gonna lie. I feel a little bit like a TDS lefty when I hear him, and I'm like, I mean, I want to believe that he's just memeing and he's using it to like threaten people into like trade negotiations that give us better trade policies, but like then people are like, are you willing to take military shit off the table? And he's like, no. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, there was it like the Netherlands or whatever, whoever owns fucking Greenland, and like their response was like, well, you know, we could take over America and give you guys education and then you wouldn't be so dumb. It's like, fucking what? Denmark, yeah. I was like, okay. That's fucking weird. Like, that's it's like they saw like fucking women on TikTok and thought like they'd give like a cunty vibe clap back. And it's just like, okay, I guess that works for like your effeminate fucking population over there, but it sounds fucking dumb to Americans. Hold on. Let me make sure fucking I got the right it's 8. It's 8 Wednesday, yes. 8 p.m. I said Eastern. I haven't heard back from Taftaj, but I'm sure she'll be fucking DMing me any second. She might be a little late, who knows. But we set it up for right about now. Greenland needs to escape from LA treatment. So like when you say escape from LA, do you mean the sequel to Escape from New York, the John Carpenter film? Is that what we're talking about? Because I kind of remember Escape from New York. We turned it into a prison island. So I had a pet possum. When me and the boys, story time. When me and the boys were living in a house that someone else's dad owned, but was condemned, and we were living in the basement because the basement was fine. So we were kind of squatting in a condemned house, but like one of the people there, his dad owned it, and we were like making money on the side, doing as a music studio, right? So we had like pooled our resources together. We stole a bunch of carpet from like the dumpster of like a carpet warehouse or something, like cut carpet pieces. We sold a bunch of that carpet. We got a bunch of like pallets from like the back of like Walmarts and shit. And then we like went to like Lucho's and bought like tires from like a place that had that like retreaded tires and like the ones that were fucked up. And so like we made our own drum risers and like we made our own vocal booth out of like pallet wood and carpet. And like we had oh shit, Civ 7 comes out February 11th. Fuck yeah, dude. I might have to get Civ 7, if I can get good at it, might be the type of game right when it comes out that I play during boring ass debates. I want to see what Civ 7 has to offer. But anyway, so we made like this recording studio. We got like, you know, old recording equipment. You know, we got drum mics. We got, you know, we already had a bunch of guitars and drum set and stuff. You know, we had like the old school, like, you know, like 16 track boards, and we had a crappy computer that like, you know, built from other pieces of computers, and we had Fruit Loops for making beats, and we had Pro Tools, and so we were recording music for people. And one day when we were down there, we were all really fucking high on like really good Molly, and while we were high on Molly, one of my friends went outside, and there was one of those fucking possums was breaking into the garbage again. And so my friend, high on Molly, was like, nope, we're getting rid of this fucking possum because the possums keep breaking in the middle of the night to like go through all our garbage. And so so he killed it, and then come to find out it had like, you know, because possums are marsupials, like the sack had like all these baby possums in it. And we were like, oh, dude, we can't fucking kill the baby possums. Like, what the fuck? So we gave them to like a person that like professionally takes care of them, that like rehabilitates them. But we kept one, okay, and we named it Pliskin, okay. We named the possum Pliskin from Escape from New York, and it was the coolest pet I ever had. It ate everything. It was very sweet. They start to get aggressive as they get older, but that's only a problem if you just don't let them out. Right? Like if you let them out and go and explore the world, what they'll do is they'll go out and then they'll come back. And then they'll go out for like a week or two and then they'll come back. And then they'll go out for like, a week or two and come back. And then eventually they'll go out for a month or two and come back. And then eventually they just go out and live their lives and they never come back. Right? So like you get a pet for like 2 or 3 years and then you kind of just like send them off to college. They become aggressive and shit if you try and cage them and don't let them like go out and mate and like have a life of their own. But man, seeing like rappers show up to like our makeshift recording studio because for very low prices we'd record their music and help them out, and like see me with a possum in my fucking lap, like a big ass possum that like hisses at him, is like, it's fucking priceless. So there you go. There's my story time. Just hop into any VC. All right, let me switch this over real quick. We're going to talk to Taftaj here in just a second. Let me just where's the pop out? There we go. Let me just grab a link real quick. Let me... All right, there we go. What does it say? Hidden use copy button. What? Oh my God. Whoops. Invite people. Copy. Why is it? What is happening? I can't get the Discord. I can't get the Discord to like send the copy and paste over because it just says hidden use copy button. So now I need to go through my own video description to find a Discord link. That was weird as fuck. I mean, she's already in the Discord, but like... All right, there we go. The fuck is she? All right, testing.
I can hear you. Incredible.
All right. Yeah, sorry. I was trying to send you an invite link because even though you're in the Discord, I know as a streamer, you probably, same thing for me, probably have like an insurmountable amount of Discord servers that you're in that you're just like, just hop in my Discord. And it's like, dude, I have to go through every streamer whose Discord I've been in at some point to find your fucking server. So I was trying to get a copy, and for whatever reason, Twitter doesn't like the copy link. It just copies what it says on the Discord, which is hidden use copy button. I was like, and that's why I was posting that to you, and I was like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I'm just like, what? What is happening here?
All right, do you have your camera ready to go, or do you need a second, or whatever?
No camera. I'm just gonna stick to audio for now.
Oh, you're gonna deny the people the fucking eye candy? I see how it is.
Sorry.
Dude, people are mad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm disappointed.
Saving Liberty. Yeah, it's been a while since I was in the streamer world, to be honest. Though I've been doing like a weekly podcast lately.
Yeah, I know you've been doing Dollcast, which is like essentially the same thing, right? I mean, like it's a live
Yeah.
podcast, or I don't know.
It's all pre-recorded,
Okay.
which is good. You know, we've interviewed some cool people. We interviewed Cenk Uygur recently.
Oh, yeah, I heard some of the fallout from that. Look, Taftaj, I have a lot of respect for you. Okay, I do.
Yes, thank you.
You are one of the few people in the streaming space that I have respect for. All right. But like, I don't care how fucking reasonable Brianna Wu is now. I am too old, and I remember Gamergate too well to like ever forgive her. I can't do it. Like, just people are like, she has really good takes now. I'm like, I don't care. You can't make me care. Like, fuck that. This is one of the champions of Gamergate. Like, fuck all the way off.
Yeah, I think Brianna was pretty cool actually. Like you were saying, she has evolved a lot politically, but it's also like, I don't know. I don't agree with Brianna on everything, and I do think that when people are like, "Oh, I really like you," but I'm not the biggest fan of Brianna. I guess that's something that I get a lot because Brianna is such like a controversial person.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there's something to be said about evolving politically over time in the public space in the way that you're kind of not allowed to do that, right? Like I was a tanky as a teenager, right? And I moved into kind of like, you know, sock dim space, then eventually became more like lefty libertarian, you know, and then culturally got older, got more right wing, and then, you know, had my moment, started reading more, becoming more conservative, and of course far more libertarian. But like, if I had done all of that online, you know what I mean? Like I don't know what that would look like or how that would affect me now, right? Like, you're kind of not allowed to change your politics or evolve politically in online because your audience doesn't necessarily evolve with you. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with like a musician, right? It's like they come out with a new album and it's like you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if the new album sounds like the last one, then it's like, okay, you're old news. But if the new album is like gone in a completely new direction, everyone's like, fuck you, you're not metal anymore.
I think that's right.
Nevertheless, fuck Brianna Wu.
Harsh. I mean, I think that there's like a real punishment for people who change politically as well. And in part, I think it's just a matter of strategy. Like, you know, the best political soldier, the kind of person you want on your side, is someone who is like die hard in their beliefs and never changes. And so when people switch politics, people tend to apply a pretty big personal penalty that kind of behavior.
I don't think that's true. I think that's only true of stable political, I guess, institutions, or we could say, right? Like, that's probably true in American history for the last 50 years, right? But like, if we look at how the left and how the right have shifted so much, right? Like, if someone is very ardent in their basic beliefs, then what they become is, you know, I didn't leave the left left me, right? Like, those are people that are like, this is what I believed in the 90s and I still believe it now, right? And I think with like the MAGA kind of populism and like even the populism on the left and like the kind of the spiral of the ideology in the more leftist spaces, right? Like, you're seeing the policy positions and the, you know, the presumed beliefs and axioms even change. Obviously, they're not changing from the axioms of the philosophy that they represent, right? But almost nobody even is like aware of those, right? Like, that's a rare person.
Maybe a better way to put it would be like, it's good to have someone in terms of political allyship who is generally going to follow the party line. Right? So, you know, you ask like conservatives in 2015 how they feel about protectionism, and they'll tell you that they're all like free traders. And then 2016, Trump comes around. You ask the same people how they feel about free trade, and they tell you that they're all protectionists. And, you know, you can inquire. This is like real polls that people have asked. You inquire deeper, and people seem sort of unaware of this change even happening. So yeah, I think you're right. Like modern politics demands like a real flexibility. Regardless, I guess like you know, to belabor a kind of a silly point, I would just say that yeah, like people don't like when you challenge them politically, especially like kind of vulgar ideologues, maybe philosophers and interesting thinkers. They tend to embrace change. But in terms of the people who make up the mass of ideologic voters, they tend to be people who, yeah, they'll strongly punish you from differing from the groupthink. And
yeah, well, they also intuit their political beliefs, right? Like they're not critically thinking through them. And I don't know that that's
Wave in here, by the way.
Yeah, Mintus Wave is in chat. Yeah, he pops in from time to time. Well, you should reach out to Mintus Wave to talk to him.
Well, I did, the fucker. I reached out to him about exactly this, and he denied my Twitter DM. He ignored me. So,
oh, how dare you, Mintus Wave? I've tried to get Mintus Wave on the show plenty of times too. It's like there's two types. Like there's a big difference between the streamer and those that make video content, right? The video content people are like, what do you mean you want to talk to me for 3 hours on a random Thursday? I have shit to do, right? Whereas like the streamer is like, yeah, this is my shit to do, is talking for 3 hours with you on Thursday. So like I don't get mad. Yeah,
you can actually make content out of it. I've been reaching out to a good handful of people. I read Anania's book, then I reached out to him, and he was nice enough to talk with me about like stuff for about an hour on this topic. So yeah, that's the other way you can get people to talk to you.
So you want to talk about civil rights? Let's talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 specifically.
Yeah, or just all of them. Yeah.
But yeah, well, I mean, the preludes I think are somewhat important, but I don't know from the libertarian position how important. I mean, they're only important historically, I think, from the libertarian position, but maybe not.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll get 64 is such a big one, but also, I mean, like 1991, I think is a big one as well because it establishes like the disparate impact standard. I will say, like, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to jump into it like too quickly because I want to get your take on things, but yeah, 1964. What's the situation in your mind?
Okay, well, hold on. First, why are we talking about it? And then we can kind of start from a foundation. Good
question. I pitched an article to Reason magazine recently about the fight for transgender rights. And my perspective is that the way we go about protecting civil rights in America has some pretty big problems, which result in, I think, pretty unproductive outcomes. And I think this is especially apparent with trans people. And my position ultimately is that trans people are well served by sort of fundamental rights to freedom, things like personal autonomy, freedom to do with your body what you will, and freedom to present yourself the way you will, so like personal expression. I think that those are, yeah, exactly, like not to be interfered with in these ways. I think those are really important. I think those are the core of what matter to trans people. And yet I think that we end up finding ourselves dragged into all of these battles where we're trying to enforce something on other people, and then people are getting really mad at us. And it's sort of like, we're not really helped by trying to like enforce standards on other people, not really, but at the same time it results in people trying to go after our rights more broadly, so like rights to personal autonomy. You see people trying to institute like laws against adults getting hormones.
Can I just say, while we talk about this, do you remember, okay, because I still am salty about this shit, 2 years ago when we did that fucking panel, okay? And we had Buck Angel and you and Richie and Chloe Cole and Blair White.
Yes, I do.
Right?
I do.
And you remember there was a moment where I was like, hey guys, like we also need to be wary of how we approach this from the right, because if the left keeps pushing all of this crazy shit and keeps pushing it on to kids, keeps pushing social emotional learning, right? Keeps pushing queer theory and ideology into like children, keeps pushing for like silly things that most trans people don't care about, like transgender sports representation and things like this, that the right isn't going to respond like with like this scalpel of like, you know, preserving individual liberty, but like stopping these things. And like that, what they're going to do is they're going to say, you guys are being freaks and you're trying to push freak shit onto my kids. So I'm done with all of it. And then Blair White laughed at me, told me I was crazy for ever thinking that that would be a thing. And then has never spoken to me ever since then. And I just want to say, it's been a couple years now, right? Am I Nosferatu, or was I just pointing out the fucking obvious?
Yeah, I think you're right with that. I think we also saw a good example with Roe v. Wade, where, you know, Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and immediately these legislators, they start instituting abortion bans, which are far beyond the scope of even what their constituency is asking for. And so there's just like, you know, there's an overcorrection here where people are so excited to respond to the change in law that, oh no, they even end up going further than, you know, what people would actually ask of them. So yeah, I think definitely
this is kind of an interesting thing too. And I think the Roe v. Wade thing, it also harkens back to the voter base and the concept of like intuiting policy as opposed to you know, thinking through it, you know, from like a philosophical position. And to me, it seems like the Roe v. Wade situation is very similar to the tariff situation. And what I mean by that is that there is an intuition of that conservatives have, because they're not ANCAPs, right? They're not anarchists. They're okay with government regulation, just as much as the left is, just on different value systems. And so, you know, with Roe v. Wade, there was like this kind of like unspoken and sometimes spoken social contract of like safe, legal, and rare, right? And I think a similar situation happens with this tariffs and like this free trade thing is, well, we want free trade. And then, you know, over time, America has capitulated to anti-free trade, right? Like we have capitulated to maintaining tariffs and additional tariffs and, you know, fraud in Chinese market. And, you know, like we play by the rules of like intellectual property, but like China and other places don't. And it's like, I think there's like kind of an intuition there that's like, look, I'm all for free trade, but if you're not going to play the game, fuck the game. And I think the same thing is kind of true with this abortion situation where like, I don't know that the conservatives have like radically changed as much as it seems, because their policy position has radically changed. But I think what really happened with many of these places is like, look, we were okay with abortions when they were only in this first trimester and they were safe, legal, and rare. This was a compromise we were willing to make. But now we have people shouting out their abortions on Stephen Colbert and doing dance numbers about how abortions are great. And we have Hollywood pushing that like abortions are good. And we have more and more clinics and like politicians in like New York example that are pushing that like we need third trimester abortions. And then we have the governor of fucking Virginia talking about post-birth abortions and being like, we're going to make the baby comfortable, right? Like, and shit like that. And then they were like, yeah, you guys stopped playing the game that we agreed to play, so go fuck yourself. And so like that kind of seems to be more of the shift that I've seen in the right in general about politics in this regard. And I think this also plays with civil rights and trans, trans rights in that regard. Obviously, trans rights are human rights. There's no distinction between the two of them. I don't think they deserve any special rights as a libertarian, but I think they deserve the same rights as everybody else, which is bodily autonomy, and everything that stems from that. But I think you're seeing kind of the same thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, sure, you guys can go get married. We didn't like Obergefell, but we went along with it. Okay, you guys can go be you and do your treatments and do whatever it is you want, so long as you're not pushing this shit on other people. And then the push comes, and the right-wing reaction, I think, is going to follow the same lines with tariffs or abortion, which is you guys stopped playing the fucking game, so fuck all your rights. Fuck the whole thing because you didn't live up to this kind of like presumed cultural contract where you were going to be allowed to do shit so long as you kind of stayed within the boundaries of like what we consider to be somewhat socially acceptable.
Yeah, I think I totally track with how you're laying this out. Kind of the way that I conceptualize it is that there's all sorts of ways to negotiate human behavior. And one strategy is to sort of like legislate human behavior at the federal level. And it turns out the government is like really bad at
Oh God, yeah.
creating like a single standard for everyone. And so what you see in markets, you know, is that people are pretty good at telling like how much cereal they want to eat or how much of X good they want to consume. The government's not really good at telling what everyone wants to consume. And similarly with civil rights, people differ on where their boundaries are. And some people, some like, you know, non-trans women, they might be totally comfortable with a woman in their bathroom and others aren't. And some are comfortable with trans
Well, I think all
athlete.
women are comfortable with women in the bathroom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say women? I meant trans women.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people sort of differ on these. And the libertarian response is to say, well, great. People differ. And so let's give people autonomy to set those boundaries in their workplace, in their home, etc. And I think that what civil rights law has done is it is an attempt by the government to set those boundaries for everyone. And frankly, I think there's probably merit to this idea that the government should step in. I'm working on pitching these ideas, and I think what is like the most.
Yeah. So I think now is the time where we really get into the nitty gritty details. I want to start with 64 and the major problems with 64. Obviously I'm wrapping up 1866 and 1875 in 64, right? Because I think in many ways 64 is meant to kind of address the problems of like of 66 and 75, like it didn't go far enough, right? But it was as far as they could get, right? So kind of wrapping those up together. There's kind of two libertarian positions here. But we need to start, before we even get into that, we need to start with a couple of definitions. And the reason is because I'm bringing you the libertarian position as like a Hoppian, right? I'm not bringing you the libertarian position as in like the LP. I'm not bringing you like the gods, guns, ganja kind of, you know, libertine ideal.
No, give me the raw, unfiltered, hardcore libertarian perspective.
Right. So there's two problems with 64. One of them very uncontroversial, one of them very controversial. So let's start with the easy one. But first, like I said, definitions. So first off, bodily autonomy is either an axiom or is logically deduced from argumentation ethics. We can skip that because it's not necessary for this conversation, but just know that that is what libertarians believe, right? That it is either the primary axiom, you know, man acts, or the theory of human action. You know, presumably if you're kind of the objectivist leaning libertarian ANCAP, right, then existence exists would be the unavoidable axiom. And then lastly, there would be, you know, that humans have a right to self-determination or bodily autonomy, right? However you want to define that, right? And so from this stems obviously all the shit, like taxation is theft, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the second thing is understanding what capitalism means to the libertarian that is a hardcore libertarian, is a big L libertarian, an ANCAP, as opposed to what capitalism means to everyone else. So capitalism to the big libertarian is, you know, the economic system of distribution that allows for the freedom, the free trade of goods and services, the voluntary free trade of goods and services, right? Now that sounds really simple, but the thing that's important to recognize here is that your typical conservative, even when they think of capitalism, they think of the state enacting those private property rights, and that the state has some right to regulation and to imposing limitations on the voluntary free trade of goods and services. That's the number one problem. And so it is a big distinction. And the second big distinction is under a Hoppian anarchist libertarian position, capitalism would also mean a communist commune, right? Like a conservative or someone else would look at capitalism as a market system of private property rights and of trade and jobs and labor. We would still say a communist commune is still capitalism, so long as everyone that is there is engaging in it voluntarily, and so long as that commune has some form of private border and this is their land and they respect everyone else's land. And so capitalism is really more a state of being that takes on many forms, as opposed to like this concept of like corporations, private companies, insurance companies, etc. Now that's usually what we believe in as efficient, right? But we would not say that the commune that has a private border and deals in those things is not engaging in capitalism. They absolutely are, even if their economic system is essentially socialist, because it's voluntary and because they're respecting private property rights in that domain. Does that make sense?
It does, in following.
Okay. So when we talk about civil rights, right, there are two things with 64. There are kind of like two main categories that are occurring. The one I think we should table for now is that the state, the federal government, is stepping in to criminalize or, abolish laws that are designed to discriminate against people for immutable characteristics, right? Like, you can't have, like, we're going to abolish the Jim Crow laws. We're going to abolish, segregation laws. We're going to abolish, like, the government enforcing some type of, like, literacy test or poll tax that is, designed to target one demographic over the other demographic. Okay? To tackle that, that's the controversial one. The one that I think everyone talks about, the low-hanging fruit here, that is kind of like every libertarian can agree on and kind of talk about, is the state making it illegal for employers or for private businesses or private, entities to discriminate against people and their goods and services for their immutable characteristics.
Yeah, Title VII. Okay.
Right. So in that regard, I think you've probably heard from a bunch of libertarians why that's wrong, right? I mean, like, I don't think that's necessarily a mystery. I think that's a pretty big part of the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's sort of wrong on its face, according to libertarian or like ANCAP sensibilities. But I guess also, I am especially keen on fleshing out the ways in which these laws are enforced. So I'll give you a little bit of background about how I'm approaching this. My impression is that there's probably some sort of compromise that we can come to as a society regarding civil rights law, which avoids a lot of the pernicious effects that I'm seeing and doesn't totally get rid of it. Quite frankly, I think like the idea of like getting rid of or scrapping civil rights law is kind of like a non-starter. And so one of my focuses...
When you say non-starter, you mean from like the ability to do so? Or do you mean
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make all sorts of like philosophic arguments about how to set up society that might be better. And some of those like might be genuinely true. Some of them are probably batshit crazy, as one tends to find in philosophic arguments. But regardless, I think that we can identify like a real problem with enforcement. And so my feeling right now is that there are certain ways in which Title VII is enforced that have to do, I think, with later civil rights legislation, but things like the disparate impact standard, where
disparate impact is like the modernization of it, right?
Yeah.
This is
well, that's the thing. I think modernizations of this law are really where like you start getting into trouble. Whereas I think I don't even know if I'd say that like anything within the text of the laws themselves is that problematic. I think it's really like all of this all of these court cases that have been built up on top of them that practically describe how these things are enforced, I think that that's where you get into some really sticky situations. And I think, well, frankly, I think we're going to see this in the next 4 years. I think the Supreme Court's probably going to rule and overturn some previous judgments on how to interpret these laws. And I think that's probably going to happen. Congress is not going to get rid of these laws, but I think the Supreme Court is going to say, hey, our previous ruling on how we interpret these laws was probably not accurate.
So I would disagree here a little bit, right? So there are two functions that are taken away primarily, I would say. Maybe there are more and I'm missing them, but there are primarily two functions that are taken away with this aspect of civil rights legislation where freedom of association is infringed upon, right? So the first one, the kind of the obvious one, right, is that businesses can't discriminate in hiring practices. People can't discriminate against what we'll say with hiring practices is a big one, right? So one Supreme Court, well, it's not a Supreme Court case. It went to the Fourth Circuit, right? So that would be Hooters of America, right? But Hooters, versus V. Phillips, right? This is, I think, an important case to look at in describing kind of the unintended consequences of that, right? Because the obvious intended consequence is like, we don't want a business to say no blacks allowed, right? But with the Hooters case, right, they were discriminated against by the Civil Rights Act in that their business model requires, for lack of a better term, women with big tits, right? That is their business, is women with big tits. And so not being able to discriminate against men in hiring practices is kind of problematic here, right? Like you can't really have a Hooters and like your waitress be a dude with no breasts, like in the short shorts and the tank and like the little tight little, t-shirt, right? Like, so it's like, so that's kind of like one version of unintended consequences. There's another case, it didn't go to the Supreme Court either, but it was ruled on in the same way, where there was a woman, I want to say it was in Massachusetts. We can look it up and try and find it, but I think it might be good for your article, right? Where she wanted to make a competitor to Uber. And the goal was, I'm only going to hire women. I'm not going to hire any men, because at the time there was a lot of women that were very concerned about being drunk with their friends at 2:00 and then getting picked up by a random dude. Now, of course, Uber since then has like changed the way that it practice, in that you can deny a ride once you figure out who's coming to pick you up. But even still, people utilize, their sister's account or something, right? Or like, someone else in the home. That information isn't always truthful. And so the concept was to do that. Well, it was civil rights legislation or interpretation in the courts that stopped her from being able to make this business, right? And so there's the unintended consequences here, right? Which is, when you get rid of freedom of association, you don't just get rid of the bad stuff, you also get rid of the good stuff. And so that, I think, is inherently problematic in the very beginning, in the sense that, now women can't have a safe alternative in the market, because the law says essentially that if you're a girl getting out drunk and vulnerable at 2:00 in the morning, you have to accept the rides from dudes. That's the only market option that's legally available to you, right?
Yeah, I like that you bring this up, because, I mean, funnily enough, my understanding of the 1964 Civil Rights Act is that the original prohibitions against discrimination on the basis of sex were put in to kill the bill. So the person who actually suggested them, so I guess you already know the story, but for your audience, the person who suggested they add the prohibitions on sex discrimination was by no means a feminist. He was part of the conservative wing, like he was very conservative. And nonetheless, his provisions ended up getting in, and they weren't really enforced at first because people kind of treated them as a joke. The progressives at the time, they weren't really interested in enforcing them. But what we see is, over time, these get expanded upon and capitalized on by feminists. So one of the
Right.
things
Well,
I
it's like
think you're
women weren't a
alluding
major
to-
part of the workforce until the 1970s, right? Like,
Yeah, they
I mean,
weren't.
obviously they were working in female positions, but like even then they were predominantly part-time, not career track positions. They weren't in, secretaries, maids,
Well, a
things
good
that were
example. A good
considered.
example is secretaries. Yeah, so like there were
Mhm.
actually court cases ruling on like, does a man have a right to like have a female secretary? And stewardesses, airline hostesses, they were another big example of this. And I believe there was a court case, 1971, where they ruled that consumer preference was not a bona fide occupational qualification. So, like, previously there was a carve out for discrimination based on occupational qualifications. So you could say, like, okay, listen, being a man or a woman is really essential to this job. It is like part of the job. Therefore, you can discriminate. And that has been.
Well, there was a compromise with the Hooters case, right?
Okay, yeah.
Which
See,
the Hooters case
I
had
don't
a
know as much about
compromise.
the Hooters case.
Right. There are plenty of articles on like the Hooters, because there's like several ones. They got sued again for like discriminating against pregnant women. But basically, was just like, you can't be a pregnant Hooters waitress. And so they argued that it was an essential function of the job. And the compromise that was reached was like, look, you can do that, but your job, the entire, you as a company, you have other positions in which that is not an essential part of the job. And so there needs to be there can't be this disparity of outcomes here, right? But you can discriminate based off of the position. So basically they allowed Hooters to have their waitresses be, the big boobed girls, but they also said, like, but you got to have like dude busboys, and you have to have guys working in the kitchen. You have to have like a company that essentially strives towards also hiring men that are looking for jobs, just in different positions at the job, which I think is like maybe like the most positive thing you could say about disparate outcomes legislation in that regard, because it was internal within the company. It doesn't really make sense from a rights-based perspective at all. It's literally just them trying to come up with a compromise, and it's dumb in every domain. But I would be remiss if I didn't point that out.
Yeah, well, I think it gets to kind of this deeper underlying question, which is what it means to discriminate. And for someone like an airline stewardess, you might argue that it's not really discrimination and that part of the job requires her being like a pretty lady. Similarly,
What is discrimination? It's just good discrimination.
Yeah, well, I think that the courts have had a real challenge in interpreting and applying these laws, in part because, for example, like let's say you have a test, right? And that test is pretty G-loaded. So it hinges pretty heavily on your IQ as a person.
This is super common nowadays in the insurance industry, especially in insurance underwriting, by the way. If you want to look for
that's
examples of
interesting,
that.
because you should not have things like this. And
yeah, but it's not.
companies-
But
I
it's
mean, the thing
not
about-
right. Like they're like, well, what
Yeah.
are these? These are all things you have to do on the job. But it's like when you take the tests, it's very clearly like an IQ
Yes.
test, disguised as a. Well, it's because they used to hire fucking college kids, and they knew that college kids had like the intellectual qualifications to do the job, and that's just no longer true, right? Like having a college degree doesn't ensure that someone has the critical thinking skills, the reading skills, to be able to do the job of insurance underwriting. And if you're not good at insurance underwriting, the mistakes you make in insurance underwriting are multi-million dollar mistakes. Yeah, they're not the
I
same
think
as other
Google
things.
also had some examples of this where private companies are constantly trying to get ahead of the law. So like there's books of Google brain teasers that they would ask people in interviews. They are just IQ test questions, basically.
Yeah.
So companies have been doing this for a long time. But it turns out that if you can show in a court that some sort of test used to hire people ends up disqualifying a disproportionate number of Black applicants, then you can be challenged for employment discrimination.
Yeah, we had a recent
hiring
case.
discrimination.
We had a recent case in police officers, where, God, I can't remember the exact thing, but a new DA came in, and had to champion this thing to basically completely get rid of the tests that were used to hire police officers, because the test was. It's a controversial thing to talk about because the test itself was like 5th grade level math. And it was disqualifying a lot of black people. And it's like, well, that disparate outcome isn't, again, the disparate outpack is just CRT. I mean, that's what it is, right? It started in critical legal studies. I mean, that's where critical race theory kind of has much of its roots, is in critical legal studies. And this concept of like disparate outcomes. It is the assumption that a disparate outcomes means discrimination, when in fact it just means that different demographics are different, and honestly it is wildly racist, and it is enshrined in our law as a form of anti-racism. It's the most problematic part of discussing civil rights in American legal system, for sure.
Well, I'd love to hone in on the kind of activist dimension in a moment. But before we get to that, I'm curious what you mean when you say that it is deeply racist. It's an example of racism enshrined in law.
Right. So if you are, so when you say disparate outcomes mean racial discrimination, right? What you are saying is that without these things, let me use a specific example, right? We'll use the police officer example, right? So if you're saying there must be discrimination, right, against black people, if black people are less capable of engaging in, or of scoring well on this test, right? You would think on its face that that's anti-racist, in the sense that it is presuming that all black people have the exact same cognitive ability, have the exact same circumstances in terms of their ability to answer whatever these questions are. And so there is this head buried in the sand kind of thing where it's like, well, clearly it can't just be that black people are in this, county or whatever, are, less capable at arithmetic. It must be that there's racism built into the test, that there's some, bias, some racist bias built into the test. And the reason that I find that to be deeply racist is, well, by their own internal critique, it would be racist because they can't address the problems. By not being able to actually find out why the disparate impacts are there, and just assuming that this is white supremacy, that this is like whites engaged in some type of privilege or, unknown bias or intentional racist bias, right? It is taking away agency from the very black people that are being presumably discriminated against. And it also is, we're incapable of addressing why those outcomes exist. If the answer is always racism, then we can't talk about real things. So one example that I like to bring up a lot is when we look at where the black population in America is predominantly living, it's, and we talk about low socioeconomic status blacks, they're almost overwhelmingly in cities. There are, right, like low socioeconomic whites are in cities, but they're also in, rural areas. And whereas black people are far more likely to be in cities. Okay, well, what does being in a city mean? Well, when we can look at lead in the water and lead in old housing and lead in the pipes. And we know that black people are getting a disproportionate amount of lead in their drinking water in utero when they're pregnant and as they're growing up. And we know that lead, like any amount of lead, but especially higher amounts of lead, has a negative impact on IQ and has, other neurological issues associated with it. And so if we go, well, it must be white supremacy. Well, now we're incapable of actually addressing environmental racism, right? Which is an aspect of this own critical race theory thing. So by assuming that it must be white supremacy and anti-black racism, we're incapable of actually addressing systemic environmental racism, and therefore it becomes a contradiction in and of itself, because the assumption that it's white supremacy and that it must be bias in the test makes it incapable of addressing the other form of presumed white supremacy, which is environmental racism, which is going to have an impact on black IQ. Like, part of the reason, like, if you're just being honest, and we don't know what percentage, but at least some percentage of the reason that blacks have a lower IQ in America is because of their overrepresented in individuals that are getting poor infrastructure, low socioeconomic status, neighborhoods in cities that have higher amounts of lead in their drinking, because poor whites that are living out in rural areas are on well water. They're on water systems for like neighborhoods. They're not on, derelict water systems that have, just been repaired for, 70 years and have many of these things that are damaging them. And then, of course, the other thing is the obvious assumption that, like, white people are, like, imposing something evil on them is kind of a racist assumption about the whites involved in making the test, instead of just admitting that, like, yeah, for whatever reason, blacks tend to do worse on these tests.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying that there's there might be some sort of environmental reason why black people in a particular area are performing worse on a test, and if you presume that the only reason for this lower performance must be that the test itself is biased, you might miss some other, valuable thing that should be looked at. I think that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Regarding the sort of activist dimension to this, one of the things that I think is interesting is that it seems like sometimes the activism and the discourse precedes the law in interesting ways. So with trans stuff in particular, we only got a ruling that included gender identity within sex. We only got that in 2020. And yet, prior
but it's
to
not
that,
part of the Civil Rights Act. That's the problem. Yeah.
Well,
it's rewording the language, right? Gender identity is not what they meant when they put in gender. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely not an originalist interpretation, for sure.
Well, to be fair, like, I think none of this is an originalist interpretation of the Civil Rights Act. If you go back to the time, there's so many copious examples of people who are legislating, who are saying things like, well, the existence of a disparity is not going to be evidence of discrimination. Like, no way, that's not going to happen. And yet, of course, the modern way these laws are applied, existence of disparity is evidence of discrimination. So yeah, we were totally beyond the original intention. But I think this, okay, so you have this recent 2020 Supreme Court ruling. And yet, before then, you see in like HR departments, giving education and guidance to companies to protect trans rights anyways, or I guess I should use trans rights in quotations, basically to protect like trans people's feelings, educate people on pronouns and whatnot. And so it seems like a lot of the arguments people make in terms of HR, CRT, activism stuff being downstream from the law, it seems to kind of, at least there's one way to challenge that, which is to say, hey, look, a lot of times companies are engaging in self-management that goes above and beyond what the law is saying. So it's not really fair to say that like the law is responsible for this. It's something else. How do you feel about that?
Well, so I mean, like, I believe in the right for businesses to discriminate in any means that they so wish. But that's separate from the law that's kind of argued by the existence of these of these anti-discrimination laws. So there's this weird, there's a contradiction that occurs within our current discussion of civil rights, which is that negative discrimination is somehow substantively different than positive discrimination. And they're not, right? Like if I have 100 employees and I positively discriminate in favor of one demographic over the other demographic, then that necessitates lowering, how many individuals would have gotten there without that positive discrimination, right? So I mean, like if we look at the tech industry in Silicon Valley, right? There are, I don't know how much I trust these reports, but there are, estimations of like how many white men were applying for positions and then how many white men were hired. And it seems to be that there are several different people that are estimating. And again, I don't want to stand by these because they're not perfect, because nobody keeps their employment records that good other than the state collecting them as equal opportunity employers, right? They would have that data, but that data hasn't been released in that domain and sifted through in that way. So these are kind of like estimations based off what data we have available. But it looks like about 33 to 35% of all applicants in Silicon Valley positions in like software engineering, data analytics, et cetera, are white men. And the hiring rate appears to be around 6%. Right. And so if you have a third or maybe even a little over a third of the people applying belong to one race, and then you have 6% of them, being accepted. Well, it's kind of interesting because, it's the reverse side of this concept of like, well, does disparate outcomes mean racism? Right? Like, is there a factor here that we're ignoring that is a reason why all of these other people are being hired in lieu of white men? Right? And so it does become evidence. Like, I do think disparate outcomes can be an evidence, but all the disparate outcomes points to is evidence that there's some factor that is causing one group to be hired more than the other. And then when we look for the factor, for example, in software engineering and data analytics and stuff, what's the factor? Well, the factor seems to predominantly be positive discrimination by businesses, against white men. But it's not against white men, it's just for everything else. Like if there's a black woman applying, like, oh my God, we got to hire this black woman so that we look good, so that we can get our DEI score, our ESG score up, right? And if we get our ESG score up, then that means that we get lower interest rates on loans, and that means that our business can grow. Even if that black woman doesn't perform as well as that white man, it's still financially beneficial for us because it improves our ESG score, and thus we have more investment opportunities. We have more opportunities for government grants. So your own tax dollars are being given to companies to discriminate positively, which automatically entails negative discrimination of other people. And so you're paying for white men to be discriminated against. Like, it's without a doubt. Now, is it the whole reason that this is separate? Probably not, right? There's probably other factors. But it is an interesting thing to look at. Now, when terms of businesses kind of being proactive about it, again, it's like, is this a natural market mechanism, or is this something pushed both by ideology, which is in a way a natural market mechanism, but by other factors, right? And so when you have NGOs, when you have state-funded media that will then shit on you for not hiring this way, well, in a way, that's kind of the government being involved, but they're very barely involved, right? And at the same time, if you have grants that are going out, right, to businesses that hire in black communities, et cetera, right, that's very explicitly the government getting involved in the market and being an active participant. And so, like, to a certain degree, I agree with you. Without a doubt, descriptively, I agree with you that it is true that companies kind of push this first, and that they're kind of there before the laws are there. And then it's almost a testing ground for laws in some way. But what I would somewhat disagree with is that that's purely a market mechanism, right? That there's culture involved in cultural institutions that are state funded. And then in some cases, there's direct state funding. And these things kind of all there, like it's have you ever read any like systems theory in sociology?
I don't know if I have.
So the basic concept of systems theory, right, is that in any system in a society, the system can be influenced by the people, and then the people influence the system, and that they're not really separate, right? So, for example, if you go to Catholic Church, right, 20 years ago, you'll find that the Catholic Church has has a lot of like masses in Spanish, right? Well, that's the fact that we have so many immigrants from South America that are deeply Catholic. The system of the Catholic Church is responding to the fact that they have all of these people that don't speak English but speak Spanish, and so they have Spanish masses, right? So the people are directly affecting the system. But then vice versa. Obviously, we can look through a billion different ways in which the Catholic Church has affected society and culture, by their precepts, by their rules, by their things. And so it's kind of the same thing, I would say, if you look at it from a systems theory perspective, is like HR, Karens or whatever, are affecting, the company's vision and goal. So they're affecting that system. And then they're affecting the market, and they're affecting the culture by those market choices. And then activists are kind of like looking at what works in those places, and that becomes a policy thing. But then vice versa, the state is putting out grants that push this culture more, right? Because like as a business, if there were no grants, if there were no ESG, if there was none of that shit, I would be a lot less likely to hire one employee over the other that seems less qualified for the job, because on its face, it's like, well, I'm going to lose money if I don't get the best candidate. But if I have all these other kind of financial incentives, well, now I'm more willing to go along with this culture of like, diversity, equity, inclusion, because I gain financial kind of like aspects there that aren't necessarily market mechanisms. They're tied to state involvement.
Well, here, okay. Totally agree.
I know I
totally
said a
agree
lot.
with all that.
I'm sorry. I'm long-winded, but like that's just who I am. I apologize.
Totally. Well, I think I can give you some like weapons a little bit in this in this debate. My understanding is that the Civil Rights Act of 1991 helped to expand what exactly it means for something to be a business necessity, and in specific, this clarified ideas relating to best practices. So, like, once a policy or practice is known to cause a disparate impact to some sort of protected group, one of the ways that an employer can defend against charges of discrimination is to prove that their practices are job related and consistent with business necessity. And if there is a feasible, less discriminatory, or better alternative, the employer's refusal to adopt it will heighten their risk of liability. So, as an example of how this plays out, basically, let's say that there are organizations that sell services to companies, and their services relate to helping to teach diversity and how to like not get in trouble with discrimination law. And when one company adopts this, and they adopt like a particularly progressive version of it,
racism goes up in the company.
Well, I was going to say, basically, I think companies end up in an arms race here. So as companies adopt more and more progressive ways to keep, their companies in check to prevent discrimination, those progressive solutions become industry standard. And so if a company fails to meet that industry standard, and then they get brought into court for discrimination, that can be a big mark against them. It can be a liability for them. And so even though the law does not say anything about, for example, like having HR or like diversity workshops on transgender pronouns, if that is the standard to include, and you end up getting brought to court and you're using some outdated version from, some old employee training handbook, well, then that is like a big problem for you, because
Absolutely,
now
yeah.
you're not doing what everyone else is doing, and that looks pretty bad. So I think maybe what's happening here is that the laws have given activists a lot of reign over how these policies, these laws are actually enforced, very indirectly. And so when we think about like bathroom stuff, sports stuff, pronoun stuff, I really see the enforcement of all of this as being kind of downstream from civil rights law. But the arcane, sort of Byzantine, confusing way in which civil rights law is applied creates this illusion of agreement. From an outsider perspective looking in, it seems like
it's like everybody has gender neutral bathrooms, right? So it must be that every business gets this.
Yeah,
it's like but but it's like
there's nothing in the law that says you have to do that.
You've defanged a company from being able to say, look, I made this decision because I have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders, and that this makes us less money, or this costs us money, and doesn't actually have good outcomes. And then they go, well, all of your all of your competitors are doing this, so that's not true. And it's like, well, it is true. It's just that everyone else is doing it, right? And so it's like, the thing is that there's a fundamental misunderstanding in the economics involved, which is that if everyone is shouldering a burden that is, financially negative, right? Then there's this presumption that the one person that isn't shouldering that burden is somehow that there is no burden, right? That because everyone else in the marketplace is doing this, that this doesn't have a negative impact. But the fact of the matter is that it does have a negative impact. It's just the legal system and the kind of right. Oh God, I can't think of the type of. I can't think of the employment law. That the employment law kind of has them in a vice here. I mean, there are a lot of other factors that go into this as well, right? Like, the National Labor Review Board, right? You don't think of the NLRB as like a thing that pushes trans rights, right? You think of it as a thing that, protects unions and protects them in some regard. Now, obviously I have negative opinions of them already, right? But there's so many other, like there's no one agency that's regulating industry, no matter what your industry is, right? Like there's 100 different 3-letter and 4-letter agencies that have some play in this kind of. That's why I mentioned systems theory, because I think it's probably the best sociological lens to look at this, which is that like every law, every state action, every activist action, every employee, every cultural thing is kind of having an effect on each other, and you kind of can't separate them. I mean, I know you have read a lot of Moldbug, right? Like, the cathedral aspect of like the state apparatus, right? But from a systems theory perspective, just kind of think of like the people and businesses and everybody else is kind of all part of the cathedral too, right? We're kind of all affecting and impacting each other.
I think that's right. I'm just collecting my thoughts a little bit on this.
I want to move on to another thing that I wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, sure.
So when I talked about the two kind of the controversial and the less controversial, and then I said the less controversial is the ability of people, private entities, to discriminate. There's another factor here that I think is really problematic and plays a role in unexpected places as well. And that is that freedom of association in private businesses is one means by which individuals, and companies made up of individuals have meaningful ability to fight back against forced integration of the state in immigration. It is the civil rights law and has made it, for example, when we talk about hiring practices, and we talk about, especially when we talk about landlords and their ability to rent or houses and their ability to sell, or HOAs and their ability to discriminate, that this has made it to where when we have a large flood of immigration, and when we have, the nation state, spending our tax dollars to house immigrants or people from certain communities, the civil rights legislation and the kind of the corpus of like common case law makes it essentially impossible for a community to discriminate against this group of people coming into their community, right? When we look at, let's say, Springfield, Ohio. Like when we look at Springfield, Ohio, and all those Haitian immigrants, there wasn't a single landlord that was legally allowed to say, I'm not going to. Now, there are ways around it, obviously, but nevertheless, they weren't able to say, I'm not going to do this. There were no insurance companies for car insurance, for example, right, that could say, look, I'm not going to insure you as a driver because you're from Haiti. And it's not because you're black. It's because car ownership is like less than 1% in the country of Haiti. And the United States government just gave you a driver's license so long as you could pass a really simple written test. And like, you're a fucking problem. And so what they had to do in Springfield, Ohio is jack up people's rates. If you talk to people in Springfield, Ohio, their car insurance rates doubled and in some cases tripled because it was illegal for the car insurance companies to discriminate against all the Haitian immigrants. But car accidents and fatalities and property damage went through the roof, mostly because the state gave them driver's licenses with minimal effort, and none of them have ever driven a car or have any idea how to drive a car. And so this is part of that problem, is that the anti-discrimination aspect means that private entities can't meaningfully fight back in the market against forced integration from the state.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something interesting here, which is, seems like a lot of conservative gripes are kind of downstream from civil rights law, at least in some way. All of these things kind of tend to be overdetermined.
What rights are downstream from civil rights law?
A lot of conservative gripes. So
gripes.
When we talk about immigration, there's been lots of discourse about like the H-1Bs, and I wonder if part of that is, if we were in like a pure meritocracy, right, where everything was determined by the markets, I wonder if conservatives would have as big of a problem with all of these immigrants. It seems like there's a lot of white guys who are, they're frustrated because they feel like they can't get a job in tech or wherever. And so they see like lots of Indian guys coming in. And maybe in a world where like hiring practices were totally meritocratic, that might not be such a big problem. But in a world where hiring practices are so determined by trying to not engage in any kind of discrimination whatsoever, you end up maybe with some like weird market effects where the result is, like you were saying, maybe you end up discriminating anyways in unintended ways. And so, or intended. And so you're talking about like housing and immigration as well. Like, the immigration would not be so big of an issue if employers or landlords could make sure that they're vetting entirely people by all the means capable to them. So I think that
there's a twofold problem here, right? Which is I think the primary gripe isn't so much the discrimination practices, actually, from the right. I think the primary gripe is this, and I heard this levied at libertarians, and I think it's so funny because it's really just the reason, libertarians or the Cato Institute libertarians, the LP libertarians, not the kind of like hardcore libertarians. But it's that people are treated like economic units, right? It's like, even if it was purely meritocratic, well, what does that actually mean? What that means is that the company hires the best person for the job based not off of the greater social kind of like context, but off of what can they do in an 8-hour window for me and my business, right? And so it may be true that an Indian American, that an Indian brought over to do something can indeed, for, $20,000 less salary, can indeed get very close to, if not the same or even more productivity out of them. But the problem is that the Indian also brings their values with them. And so there's a kind of a high time preference issue here, right? Which is that the company is low time preference for 2 degrees. One, they don't care what happens to the community because that's not part of their bottom line or their fiduciary responsibility. And I'm not saying that they necessarily should care in all ways. If it, like I don't think that should be their highest value. But the other thing too is the time preference situation where it's like Indians tend to be very, very nepotistic. And so there is a rolling downhill snowball effect where you hire a few H-1B visa people, they end up staying, they end up in positions of leadership, and then they end up hiring people from their own community and culture. And so the company becomes very Indian in its hiring practices. And then there's that added layer where hiring a bunch of Indians becomes meeting DEI standards, because DEI standards are not right. They're not, let's hire more blacks, let's hire more Latinos, let's hire more of all of these other groups. What they really mean is let's not hire too many white men, right? And so you can get a pat on the back even though your company is predominantly a nepotistic company business that's hiring a bunch of Indian men, or a bunch of white women in HR, even though blacks aren't even really benefiting from this, right? Like blacks don't benefit that much from DEI. Conservatives don't necessarily like to hear that, but it's true, right? The biggest beneficiaries of DEI are white women. And it's because it's not about hiring more of all of these minority groups. It's about not hiring white men. But again, like I said, the other aspect of that is, and I think even more to the conservative gripes, if you will, is you're bringing in people from a culture that doesn't match our culture, and our ability to assimilate in America goes down significantly the less that we can discriminate, right? Like when the Irish came over in New York, why did Irish people become part of this quote unquote white people? Is it because they have the same skin color? No, right? Like they were different. They had, the average Irish IQ even today is like 92. They're redheaded and freckled a lot of ways, right? Like they look different. They're substantively different than the white Europeans that settled America. And so they became part of the white group because they faced discrimination, because they got here and it was no Irish need apply, right? It's also true that, a majority of the immigrants during the potato famine went back to Ireland eventually. And that's not what's happening now. And the reason they went back to Ireland is because they genuinely were refugees, but the discrimination that they faced here was enough to gatekeep those that didn't want to put in the effort to beat down that discrimination, right? The discrimination is a gatekeeping factor. It's a means of like cultural cost, right? And because you show up with a certain cultural differences, you're discriminated against. And so I think conservatives are very, very worried. Maybe they intuit it more than they think about it, that the more we're incapable of discriminating, the more we're incapable of maintaining a cultural identity as a nation, as a people, as a community, and the more we're incapable of assimilating people into our culture. Because if you can't discriminate against them, if you can't gatekeep them, if you can't have barriers toward them participating in the larger American society, then you can't make them American, and you can't enforce the American culture upon them. And then, this concept that like diversity is our strength, it can't be our strength anymore, right? Like the Japanese understand this. That's why if I go and I marry a Japanese woman and I have a kid, that HAPA, or HIFU, depending on, which region, right, is not a full Japanese citizen. It's only their children that are a full Japanese citizen. And the Japanese recognize and understand that it takes multiple generations to assimilate one into our culture. But then that third generation really adopts and understands the dominant culture and brings with it some positives from the other culture. We're losing that ability. We lose that ability every time we lose a right to discriminate.
Certainly interesting. There's a few ways to go with the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe one of the ways to think about civil rights legislation is that it functions something like a tax that is redistributive towards minority people. And I think that, maybe in like kind of a plain or honest way, is maybe not the worst thing. How would you pitch a redressal of civil rights law to someone who is not libertarian or ANCAP? So sort of assuming someone is okay with a tax like that, they're okay with state action. How do you point to them that, like, no, even under your value system, you should be maybe skeptical of
Are they predominantly left wing or predominantly right wing?
Let's say they're predominantly left wing. Yeah.
Okay. So they're okay with wealth redistribution, and they're okay with these people coming in, and they believe that diversity is our strength. And so the concept that, like, are we speaking on immigration, or are we speaking as the entire corpus of immigration law? Or sorry, not immigration, civil rights law.
I'll say, to challenge you, focus on trans things, but you can go in other directions as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first and foremost thing that I talk about in this regard is kind of like, is the stick, right? Is the fear, right? So when I say, when I talk to left-wing people about trans rights, I say, like, well, okay, sure. But, like, the example that I often use is socialized healthcare, right? It's like, look, you have socialized healthcare, and let's say Bernie got elected and he institutes, socialized healthcare and abolishes private insurance. Well, what do the Republicans coming in 2 or 4 years do with that power? Do you genuinely believe that Republicans will give up power and bring it back to the markets, to let the markets decide? Or will they utilize that state power as a means of enforcing their values that you don't agree with, right? Because just because you enact laws for your values doesn't necessarily mean that those laws will always be used to protect your values. Those laws will be used to protect the domain that they're set up for, and they can be poisoned or turned against you. So with like socialized healthcare,
how might this happen with civil rights?
Right. So with civil rights, you make it so that it is, illegal to engage in hiring practices against, different demographic groups, and you need this kind of like, you need this outcome. Well, that white adjacency is a thing, right? And we're already starting to see how this isn't just affecting groups that are, the dominant white culture in America. This has already bled into groups that are considered privileged, despite the fact that we know that there is racism, despite the fact that we know that they lack that power. So if you look at like Harvard and the way that Asians are discriminated against to a higher degree than even whites, and that it's even more difficult for them to get into the school. And it's like, well, you may be okay with that concept of adjacency and white adjacency, but if you're looking at how civil rights legislation, especially like we said with the 2020 case, where, gender identity was reframed for trans issues, well, what happens when businesses and ESG and DEI and things like that determine that white women, for example, are actually just as privileged as white men, and that we need to utilize civil rights, laws and disparate outcomes and, protections as a means of actively discriminating against white women and keeping white women out. Well, what happens when black people that make up 13.1% of the population and have gone over the last 50 years from, 12.9 or 12.6, 12.7 to 13.1. What happens when we have a wave of immigration of Latinos and, it's actually it's actually now, black people with their established family and their disparate outcomes, are doing better than the Latino immigrants from third world countries. What happens when we start, going against them? I mean, we're already starting to see, for example, in Chicago, where gangs are having to come together and put aside their differences because civil rights protections and immigration protections have afforded, unintended protection for Tren de Agua in Chicago, where they're taking over new territory. And the gangs recognize that this welfare, that this help that they get, that public housing, that, investment in black communities, that all of these things are meant to, protect them and to help them get a leg up and to help them, achieve success in a way that they've been held back because of redlining and all these other things. And yet these same laws, these same systems are being used by corrupt politicians to protect, violent Venezuelan cartels. And they're not the same thing as black gangs that care about their community to a certain degree. Like if you go against these people, they chop off your fingers and send them to your family. And so, just because you believe that your specific preferred oppressed demographic group is benefited by these laws doesn't mean that other political interests, corrupt interests, corporate interests that purchase politicians, won't use that same legislation against those very same presumed oppressed demographic groups in the future, because you're in a race to the bottom to determine who is most oppressed. And if you're racing to the bottom to determine who is most oppressed, it's a lose-lose situation, because if you win, then you're the most oppressed, you're the most destitute, you're the ones with the most problems. But if you lose, simply being on a different position on the ladder, you might have those very same laws used and held by corporations to keep you down, to the benefit of those that are presumably worse off than you.
Yeah, I mean, just to circle it back to the conversation we had earlier regarding Roe v. Wade and the conservative overreach, I do think that there's probably a danger, maybe not in using these exact laws in ways that
but building upon them.
People. Yeah, there's a precedent established, which is just, it's the government's responsibility to legislate on these things, like, bathrooms, and legislating that all trans people need to be allowed to use the women's restroom. That's one way for the government to handle this. The other way for the government to handle it is to say that no trans people can use the women's restroom. And both of these sort of just trample over individual people's preferences. And maybe one makes one group happy, but the other group makes an entirely different person unhappy.
So this is,
I think,
this is,
yeah.
I think this is where we're getting.
I need to
go ahead. I'm sorry.
soon. So I'll just this is
What's
probably
soon?
TBR. Yeah, probably, I don't know, next few minutes. But so I just want to end on
I'll introduce it. I'll introduce it. Okay.
Yeah,
and then just kind of let you mull over it. Maybe you can DM me or talk to me about it later. The other more controversial situation here is the existence of public property. This is the more ANCAP position. This is why the Civil Rights Act, even in establishing Jim Crow, or abolishing Jim Crow, can be problematic, because when you have public property, there is preferential treatment towards a concept of egalitarianism, and sometimes this can have disastrous consequences because the state doesn't act like a private property owner. And the best example of this would be in Washington state. We legalized drugs. We got the libertarian win that we legalized drugs. But the problem is that because public property existed, we had druggies on streets. We had druggies in parks where children were. We had druggies, smoking weed and puffing clouds of stinky weed everywhere, and strung out people in all of these facilities and places. And so there is an inherent problem with civil rights legislation that is tied really just to the existence of the state in general, which is that some discrimination is good, some discrimination is bad, but when you have public property, you're kind of forced to have the most egalitarian means of enforcing things, right? So like, I don't want my children going down the road and seeing a gay pride parade with leather daddies slinging their dick in the middle of the streets. But it's public property and they have the permit. And if we deny them the permit, then that's discrimination against LGBT people. But if we were a private property owner, we wouldn't have these fucking issues. This is why libertarianism is inherently right-wing and discriminatory, because it's the only functional system. And so obviously we can't get into that and what that means, but like the anti-discrimination of the state in public property causes problems, even in ways that we wouldn't necessarily think. And even all of Civil Rights Act is bad for that reason.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I said is that like a lot of the things that conservatives think are problems are not necessarily problems inherently, but they're just problems because like society's too libtarded to actually deal with them. And I think you're getting to one of them, which is like ideally society should be able to like strongly enforce property rights such that if you never want to see like a drug addict in your life, you can just, avoid seeing them. You should have plenty of opportunities to do that. And, I tend to be very libertarian leaning on these things. I think that if people want to do, drugs, I think that they should have a lot of freedom to do that. Now, I'm not as libertarian leaning as you are maybe on this. But regardless, right. I think that a lot of the issue of that could be dealt with.
The true hardcore libertarian position is the public parks should be given back to the people. But if they're not going to be given back to the people, you shouldn't let fucking drug addicts in your public parks. And like the less libertarian people will actually be like, oh, that's discriminatory and wrong and anti-libertarian. And it's like it kind of horseshoe theory even within libertarianism here. And that's why I said it's controversial and it requires a lot more. But I wanted to at least address that topic, right? Which is that the concept of keeping the state from discriminating in its own public property and its own public pieces is in effect the state establishing hedonism, degeneracy, disorder, and forced libertine problems. Like there's a lot to go into what we can't get into now, but I wanted to at least address that because I have a problem with all of the Civil Rights Act, and most people that have heard libertarians would be like, "What?" Like wouldn't realize that.
No, yeah, I think libertarian problems with the Civil Rights Act are pretty long-standing. I think
Diverse.
Okay, this is so interesting. Because the very first message that I ever sent to Zach Weissmuller of Reason, I said, I'm listening to your podcast with Mike Solana on San Francisco and got to the part on drug decriminalization. It seems like you ran into a bit of a tension there, so I wanted to give you a suggestion. I think it might be worth it to you, at least rhetorically, to point out that legal drug industries create certain externalities. The libertarian/ANCAPy response is that private property owners can deal with those externalities by enforcing serious restrictions on who can and cannot be on their property. The tensions come from the fact that San Francisco is not going to let people hire private security to escort addicts off the property with guns, LOL. So practically speaking, it seems like San Francisco either has to, A, keep drug criminalized, not a super libertarian position, or B, implement some additional policies to keep drug addicts off the street, not a super libertarian position. So yeah, it's funny that you mentioned this. This is something that I've definitely talked to people about before.
This is like this is the civil war in libertarianism, right? Versus the libertines, or like the Reason Cato types, right? And our types, which are the much more ANCAP position. It's that right there. It's that, well, the problem is the public property. And if you're not going to get rid of the public property, then what are you going to do? And their answer is, well, bodily autonomy. And it's like, oh, okay, but like bodily autonomy in my kid's public school? Do we just let heroin addicts and and strippers just like hang out at the kids' park at the public school that my kids go to? Oh, well, you should just, what do we do here, right? If they're not going to give up the public school, then ought there be, ought the state act to the best of its ability like a private property owner would? And a private property owner, certainly with very rare exceptions, would allow strippers and heroin addicts on the kids' playground during recess.
Yeah, Totally. Well, it's super interesting conversation. Definitely appreciate you sitting down with me. And
Yeah, I'm happy to give,
find some
insight, and I'll be, definitely send me the article when it's done. I'd be
For
interested
sure.
to read it and your perspectives.
Yeah, I think you'll really like it. One of my ideas is to sort of within the reason libertarian types, sort of maybe push the boundaries on things just a little bit and introduce some of these more ANCAPy type ideas. Even though, that said, I'm not again, I'm not like super ANCAPy even on this necessarily, but I do think that there's examples of just the government failing to enforce civil rights effectively. And, there's a very simple libertarian argument, which is not that extreme, which is just the government sucks at doing things. And it's sort of not surprising that even when the government has like very good intentions, it just sucks at like acting on those intentions. And yeah, I think that's definitely what's happening here.
Well, it has to create a one-size-fits-all situation, and it's essentially impossible, right? Like the whole transgender bathroom thing is like, I think probably one of the perfect examples of it. Like, dude, just let private property owners determine this. And the Starbucks ghouls will go to Starbucks, and the fucking local coffee shop will be like, dudes in dresses aren't allowed in our fucking women's bathroom.
I mean, that's the
And
thing.
then you get to choose where you go get your coffee.
Yeah, I think so. I think, but the thing is, people don't even understand that private companies don't get to decide these. Like, I don't know if you follow the debate whenever there's like censorship online in social media sites. There's all this discussion where it's like, well, it's the private company's right to discriminate. But you dig into that more and you realize that like, oh, the big problem with this logic is something like Twitter, now X, if they engage in, allowing total free speech, well, then all these companies that partner with them, Coke and Disney and whatnot, there's a real argument to be made that they're creating like a hostile work environment by partnering with a company that allows these radical ideas to be expressed on their platform. And so these companies feel actual legal governmental pressure, just very, very indirectly to censor people or to control the speech of their
and that's
employees,
not
et cetera, et
including
cetera.
it's not including shit like CISA and FBI agents actually actively working with them and kind of pseudo threatening them if they don't go along with what they want anyways. Like that's not even counting the direct state involvement that many of these people have.
Yeah, I think part of the problem here is just that like understanding these things deeply requires a very in-depth dive on the law, and a lot of the relationships are kind of tenuous or indirect. So it's difficult to make these cases super affirmatively, but I'm definitely gonna do my best.
Well, I'll definitely love to read it. Are you like doing any like at least shout out Dollcast and where people can find that or whatever. You know what I mean? Like whatever
Shout
you're
out
doing.
Dollcast. I mean, quite frankly, I've been like so kind of offline. I don't even post on Twitter that much anymore. I don't know. I started meditating and working out, and now I think about posting something on Twitter, and I'm like, I'm good. But hopefully, I'm channeling all that energy into more productive work. So, au revoir.
So
It's been lovely.
Where can they find Dollcast? God damn it.
Dollcast. Just search Dollcast, and you'll get like Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Actually, YouTube might be like a different thing, but you'll get like tons of stuff.
All right, fair enough.
Right. Yeah, talk to you later.
The benefit of fame, where you can be like, just Google it, you'll find it. Like, all right,
You'll find it. I think. Yeah, Dollcast Brianna Wu. You'll find it.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm barely Googleable.
Yeah, I think Taftaj is good SEO. Anyways, yeah.
All right. Every time I'm done talking, the silent void is rough. I have to like immediately be like, all right, hold on, how do I get some music going? This is rough. All right, I'm back. I got some music in the background. I don't feel so quiet. All right, so that was interesting. I'm super excited to see what she writes about this. I like Taftaj. Some people said they didn't like. A bunch of people left the moment she wasn't showing her pretty face. I see how it is. So much shorter than expected? Yeah, I would have expected to go into it a little bit longer as well. But I mean, you know what it is. It is what it is. We didn't discuss an actual length. It was still an hour and a half, to be fair. Right? Like, I mean, like, not every discussion can be the Joe Rogan discussion. Scott, if you were to meet anyone from historic past, who would it be? Like, if they were to just, like, teleport to me now in whatever their peak state was, like, are they able to have, like, an impact on society, or is it just, like, I could meet and have a conversation with them? I feel like that's, like, an important distinction. Because, like, if they were able to have an impact on society, like, I might bring, like, Nikola Tesla back or something. Like, that would be someone cool to talk to and also, like, bring here today. But if it's, like, just, like, have a conversation with, oh, it's such a, like, I would want to be able to speak with Alexander the Great. I would want to know, like, what motivated the empire. What was it that made him such a powerful leader that inspired so much in his people? You know, like, there's a rewrite of a famous speech of, like, you know, him shaming his own soldiers and, like, in their desire to go back home in their conquest, and, like, how he like this speech, like, changed everything, and, like, you know, like, they completely all realized that they would never be as good as Alexander, and that, like, they're pieces of shit for wanting to go back home and not sticking it out with him to conquer the known world. Right? Like, I want there's so much I would, like, what made him so enigmatic, right? And also discuss philosophy with him, right? Like, he was tutored by Aristotle. He knows Aristotle. He can talk about Aristotelian, you know, philosophy and things like that. Nah, Socrates taught fucking Plato. Fuck Socrates. Like, if I had to choose, like, a Greek philosopher, we're talking Aristotle. But I would choose to speak with Alexander the Great. So it's like Lysander Spooner. I can read Lysander Spooner's readings and ideas. It'd be cool to talk with him, sure. But, like, I want something that I genuinely can't understand. Right? I want to talk to Alexander the Great. Genghis Khan or Adolf Hitler? I would probably rather speak to Kublai Khan. Just because of Kublai, like, where did Kublai Khan get his kind of, like, his inclusive philosophy from? How did, you know, he could speak about Genghis Khan, but also speak upon so many other things. I mean, if you wanted to know some secret shit, like, I'd want to know, like if they were forced to be honest with me, like, let's talk to, like, the, you know, the head of, like, the transitioning Knights Templar. Kublai Khan is Genghis Khan's grandson, I believe. I'll check. Yeah, grandson of Genghis Khan. Like, Genghis Khan was a conqueror, but Kublai Khan, like, established the Mongolian Empire. Like, if I had to choose between them, I would definitely pick Kublai, because, like, he could pretty accurately speak to his grandpa and the reverence and, like, what occurred, you know, but also so much more. If I could have a conversation with anyone alive right now, who would it be? It depends on, like, so here's the problem. Like, if I could speak to anyone alive and, like, I could have, like, there's a couple of factors here. Like, can I show it online? Would be part of it. right? And also, like, are they forced to speak with me in a truthful way? Like, do they have like some magical effect where they want to speak with me and et cetera, right? Because like, if both of those are true, Xi Jinping, that's who I would want to speak with. Like, if he had to be honest with me and like, and I could like showcase it, that's who I would speak to. But like, if those things don't exist, I would like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who I would want to speak with the most. Trudeau? No, I'm good. Trudeau would just spout bullshit. Yeah, Putin definitely gave me something, but I think there's more. I think we're more intimately aware as a culture and society of right, like we need Xi Jinping on the next live stream where I'm unsubscribing. Yeah, sorry, buddy. Yeah, no, I think Putin talks to people. Like we get a sense of who Putin is. You know what I mean? Like he's more public. He does more interviews, etc. But like if I could make them tell the truth, man, Xi Jinping would be who I would speak with. But if I can't make them tell me the truth and I'm just interviewing someone, Malay would be great. Trump would be a great one. He'd rage quit after a while because I'd lay into fucking Trump. I mean, I'd ask good questions. I have things I like about Trump, but I wouldn't do a Theo Vaughn interview. That's for sure. Yeah. About Winnie the Pooh or like Tiananmen Square and shit. Yeah. Yeah, Javier Milei would be an insane get. I don't have the resources to talk to Javier Milei simply because I don't have a translator. You know what I mean? I'd need to get bigger and have the money to like be able to have a translator with Javier Milei. But I would enjoy a conversation with him, for sure. Trying to think if there's anybody else I would like really, really, really would just be like, holy fuck, I want to talk to this person. Because it's a good question. I don't know. Like, obviously there's a ton. Jerome Powell? Yeah, I don't think that would be an interesting conversation. Well, that would be alive or dead. Benjamin Franklin is like one I think about often. Just because he's like a wild card, you know what I mean? Benjamin Franklin is one of those people like alive or dead that I would want to talk to. But like if I could keep them here, like if I could just teleport them from the past in their prime, talk to them, and then they get to live out in the world, it would be Nikola Tesla. Because I think Nikola Tesla would do like great things. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. All right, boys. I'm not going to do any more content, even though it's only been a little over 2.5 hours. I don't have anything specific planned. We could get into stuff, but I'm gonna be coming in. I'm probably gonna do a long stream tomorrow, which is I'm on a debate / discussion panel on Wick at I think it's 6 o'clock. Let me check. Is this it? Yeah, 6 p.m. And then we'll probably after that do like libertarian nerd night shit and like go over Stefan Kinsella and stuff, because I think that ends around 8. Depends on how I'm feeling and depends on whether or not we end at 8 or if I end up staying on till like 9 or so. But if I like get out like right around 8, we'll do the Kinsella speech and talk about libertarian nerd night stuff. And then Friday, why am I a fanboy of Nikola Tesla? I don't know that I'm necessarily a fanboy per se. I just think he was really intelligent, and he had a lot of, like, he had a genius mind for things, but that he was held back and held down by the state, by Edison, by other people, and that, like, I would be interested to genuinely hear his side of the story on all of that, and then just see what he does in the world, you know, unhampered by those things. Yeah, so tomorrow we're going to do Wick's panel on, like, what does it mean to be a man, I think is the topic, or like a modern man. Let me see. Men in the modern age. I think it'll be a fun thing to talk with a bunch of soy boys about. And then we may or may not do Libertarian Nerd Night after that. And then Friday I will be debating Average Debate Enjoyer, or whatever his name is. Yeah, Tyler, Average Debate Enjoyer, on interventionism. And then we'll do a Sunday Fun Day. You know, that day we'll obviously I'll take Saturday off. Do some things, work on the stream. I need to make some clips on Saturday because I have Saturday off, as well as see if I can set up a virtual what is Libertarian Nerd Night? I mean, there's not really, like, there's no podcast or like anything like that. I just kind of what I call it when we go and delve deep into like libertarian philosophy. So the video that in question that I'm speaking on is it is titled from Stephen Kinsella, John Locke's Big Mistake. Stephen Kinsella at Liberty in the Pines. It's 37 minutes and 15 seconds, and discussing like the philosophical problem with the concept of homesteading from the Lockean proviso, and like the concept of self-ownership, and why these are like unnecessary as far as argumentation ethics and you know, the non-aggression principle in our philosophy goes. So it's just a very nerdy, heady, very libertarian kind of form of content. Will you ever do a Heroes of Capitalism on Nikola Tesla? I mean, he's a hero, but I don't know if he's necessarily a hero of capitalism. I keep trying to go in and delve in and research people when I have free time, and then I just keep discovering problems with so many of these people. I was going to do Calvin Coolidge, and then I discovered that Calvin Coolidge signed into law the Federal Reserve is a permanent institution. And then I was like, yo, as cool as he was on a bunch of other shit, like, fuck this. You know, I might end up like doing another one, and then instead of it being like heroes, it might be like great men of capitalism, because so many of them are, you know, like none of them are perfect, and some of them have major flaws. And so, you know, we may do this thing where like we discuss the good and the bad. I wouldn't obfuscate information. Can I do a stream on World War II General Ted McCarthy? I'm not a big World War II history buff. Calvin, not Coolidge. Yeah, right. Believe it or not, I'm not a huge like World War II history buff. I might be like the only man that gets to middle age and hasn't hit that necessary thing where we all start watching you know, History Channel documentaries on World War II. Like I am much more knowledgeable on like the Civil War than I am on like World War II. Though it may be interesting to when is Martin Luther King Day? Oh, it's a Monday that I'd probably be doing Prime Guys. Because I kind of almost want to do because Martin Luther King Day is also Robert E. Lee's birthday. It's the 19th, which is a Sunday that I have the kids. Maybe I might be able to do a PowerPoint thing, and that Sunday do a presentation on Robert E. Lee. That could be fun. Because I know a lot about Robert E. Lee. And his birthday would be that Sunday before Prime Guys. It also depends on how much energy I have. So I don't want to commit to doing that on that day. And then like I get no sleep with the kids that weekend. Because I'm a single dad when I get the kids, and to two toddlers, one of whom is autistic. So it's a lot. And I often get no sleep. We'll see. I may do that. We'll have to see. I started viewing World War II through framing of it being a failure of socialists. Life in the USSR is super interesting too. Labor unions basically fucked up central planning too. Well, I mean, central planning fucked up central planning. But yeah, fair enough. It's an interesting perspective, I guess. But yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow bright and early, which is like, 5 to 5:30 p.m. Eastern. I heard from black people today say MLK Day should be federal holiday for only black people in the U.S. to get the day off from work paid for. LOL. Yeah, that's dumb. But, black race hustlers are being dumb is not anything new in American culture and politics. So, but yeah, we're going to call it an early night. I think it was a fun interview, and I'll see you guys back tomorrow for what's likely to be a very long stream. And then I'll see you guys Friday as well. So, appreciate you guys. Love you. And, join the Discord. I'm gonna work on clips this Saturday. So if you have any good clips or anything that you want to do from the YouTube or anything, join the Discord, put it in the stream clips. Follow me on Twitter if you want to see me be toxic. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe all of the live streams, and click that notification bell. But if you want to get the go lives, you got to be in Discord. Consider being a channel member for only $3.99. You get cool emotes and cool stuff. And as always, if you super chat, questions will be answered. So I mean, none of you guys took the opportunity to super chat questions to Taftaj, but she was in the chat too, so that's on you guys. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.